Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Max Danielsen Show. I'm your host, Max Danielsen, and joining me today is, of course, as you guessed it, another Austin College baseball player. We have Jackson on the show today. Jackson, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Jackson, as I've told you before, it is a tradition around here that we ask our guests, number one, what they do here at Austin College, is because this is basically where I get all my hosts from. But more specifically also, what if you play a sport here, what you do there, and then what your favorite sports teams are. So I'll let you take it away.
All right. So like you said, I'm a sophomore here at Austin College, and I am a returning pitcher. I'm also a double major here with economics and finance, and that's about it.
And then what about your favorite sports teams?
All of my favorite sports teams are in Houston. That's where I'm from. So we have the Astros, the Texans, and the Rockets.
Gotcha. Any NHL team, or you not follow much?
I don't follow NHL too much. I was a big Houston Aeros fan whenever we had them. They're a minor league team. But since we did away with them, my interest in hockey has sort of fallen down. So.
And then what about for college? Like, do you have a big college team, or are you just just all around basically?
All around, but if I were to say my favorite football college team would probably be U of H.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, that's what I was guessing, man.
Yeah.
That's what I was guessing. They're not having a bad season this year. They really aren't.
Yeah, no.
It's not the best season. Well. It's not like, SMU, where, and speaking of which, they played them just a couple weeks ago, and we talked about that last podcast, and that was a really, really good game. I was very surprised how Houston played. So, they're definitely not, a powerhouse yet, but, good Lord, what I saw out of them, they can make it there. I know a long time ago they were, but yeah, we'll just have to see about that. And speaking of which, with your MLB team, man, we'll start off with MLB. It's the biggest news, of course, and that is the World Series. It is the first championship series of all the three sports that have a championship series that each team did not win at home. It was such an interesting series. Both teams, of course, star-studded. You have the Nationals, who are an up-and-coming team, a very, very young team. And then you just have the machine of the Houston Astros. It was definitely a back-and-forth game, so I want to get your opinion on it, of course, being an Astros fan. It was a heartbreaker. They started out 2-0. Greinke was pitching one hell of a game. And then he comes out, and then, of course, the whole thing happens, unfortunately. But I just want to get your opinion on what you thought of the World Series, what you think that the Astros did wrong, and going into now this offseason where they could be losing Garrett Cole on the mound, where they need to rebuild at.
Yeah, so definitely going into the playoffs, obviously having the best record in the MLB, you have a lot of high hopes for them. But I felt like they're almost too confident going into the World Series, as the Nationals were definitely the underdogs, as I don't think that they've won a World Series prior to it.
They haven't in, I believe it was 84 years, if I'm not mistaken.
So, yeah, with that being said, I think our hitting was okay. I don't think the hitting was the problem. I felt like it all came down to whenever we had runners in scoring position, we then weren't producing. We had it was either equal or a little bit more hits in the very last game up until like the 8th or 9th inning. But if you looked at the left on base, we had about 11 or 12. So that could have been the outcome. Mm-hmm. Also, I feel like Greinke definitely should have been left in at least another inning. He was around 80 pitches in the 8th inning and gave up 2 walks, which I felt like one walk was questionable. And then he gave up a home run. But I felt at that time he was still in his groove. He was still doing what the Cy Young does. But still a rough subject.
Yeah, do you feel like there were any players that didn't play well for you or for the Astros in the postseason? I know Altuve played really, really well. George Springer, of course, played well. Bregman came off an MVP year. He's playing well. But I know Alvarez, in the summer, he was just cranking home runs left and right. And then he kind of dialed down towards the end of the year. So I want to ask you, are there any guys who you feel like underperformed in that series?
So up until the World Series, you can definitely look at Alvarez's at-bats and his average. and it was tanking dramatically. But with that being said, he was a rookie. But you could also look at Soto for the Nationals, who performed arguably one of the best for their team, and in my opinion, might have been the MVP for the World Series. And he was also 21 years old. But I feel like if you were to nail it down to anybody, I'd probably say Bregman. I don't think Bregman lived up to the hype. He was a MVP going into the World Series, and then I felt like there's a lot of positions that he was put in that he didn't necessarily live up to the level that he's talked about. So,
I mean, and even so, a guy, and I just thought of it, Yuli Gurriel, he played really, really well also. He gave the Astros that 2-0 lead going into Game 7. And I looked up for the Nationals, their last championship was with the Washington Senators back in 1924. So I want to say that's about 95 years. So very interesting, of course. But then Astros, I mean, it's almost a given. Probably next year they will be. Of course, they're going to be in contention for a World Series. Now, the question if they go back to the World Series is definitely, so to speak. We'll definitely have to see about that. But like you said, now I'm saying the Senators. The Nationals were really the underdog coming into the postseason. They beat the Brewers in the first round. If Josh Hader didn't have his meltdown on the mound, they would not have gotten there. But if Hader didn't do what he did on the mound, Nationals wouldn't have got there, and probably Astros would have gotten that championship because, let's face it, the Dodgers went back to the World Series. They were going to choke again. Clayton Kershaw has not pitched well in the postseason. Even so, I feel so bad that Justin Verlander has just not – like, he's pitched well in the postseason, but then when he gets to the World Series, he just does not perform as well.
Yeah. There was a couple of games that I felt like he did his part, but it ended up being that the games that he did his part, our hitters didn't necessarily produce the run support. And, as a pitcher, if you're pitching your butt off for, 7 or 8 innings and you're not getting any run support, it's, very frustrating to go back onto the mound and then continue to do what you need to do.
Yeah, and don't get me mistaken, Justin Verlander, you look at the stats he put up on those games. I mean, he pitched some of the best games, but everyone looks at that ERA of, we went 0 for 6 and had an over 5 ERA. Well, that ERA it's one of the stats in baseball that I hardly will look at with a guy, because that earned run average is not the biggest thing for a pitcher. It's, their strike percentage and everything else. So when I look at stats for pitching, ERA is probably the last stat I look at. And of course, Verlander, those games, I wish I had the stats up, but I know he had multi-strikeout games, barely walked anyone, barely had any hits, but when it came down to the end of the day, it was just the Astros not putting the ball in play.
Yeah.
But then another big thing that broke this week, and it really sucks because this story over the years has just gotten worse and worse and worse for this guy, and I'm talking about Josh Hamilton. At one point, this guy was probably the best player in baseball. At one point, back in that 2010, 2011 era. But, I mean, injuries derailed his career, of course, that drug addiction. And now the fact that it comes out that he was arrested for his injury to his daughter. And this whole incident, I know the one incident that I looked at in particular was the day he was inducted into the Rangers Hall of Fame. I believe that was September 30th, where he threw a water ball at his daughter. There was a lot of other things, but the number one thing I keyed in was that he threw a water ball at his daughter's chest and said to his daughter, "Tell the judge now how bad of a dad I am." And it just sucks. And I don't want to take it in that this is all 100% true because, number one, Josh Hamilton, he's kind of psycho, but more specifically, also his wife's psycho. There are a lot of things about both of them that are not good. So I want to ask your opinion about that. What do you think about this whole Josh Hamilton thing? I mean, what do you think of? Because it really sucks because I know there are a ton of kids here in Texas that looked up to Josh Hamilton because he was such this role model and because he was this, he advocates Christianity and all this stuff. And then you see the other side of him, this drug addict, this guy that, is abusive towards his family. I mean, I don't know what to think, man. I really don't.
Yep. I mean, I agree with you. I feel like ever since his career sort of came to an end with the abusing of drugs or with people, I felt like I can almost nail it specifically to drugs. I felt like anybody in the right state of mind shouldn't be able to beat anybody, especially their own daughter.
Yeah, especially.
So I feel like he's definitely still fighting a lot of battles with drugs in his everyday life. That's probably not, being publicly announced, but that's very, very disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what is going to come up. There's probably going to be more information that comes up within the next couple days. I know, especially when I saw it break through Bleacher Report, I read it and they didn't have anything, but then like minutes later, literally probably 5 minutes later, things came out about different incidents and all that. So, I mean, we'll just have to watch and see about that. But moving on into football with college football, there were a couple big upsets, and of course the one big game with LSU. We'll talk about that here in a second. My past guests, it seems like my guests have now jinxed teams every single week, and no pressure put on you when we get to that. But two teams in particular that I'm talking about. TCU upset number 15 Texas by the score of 37-27. And in that game, Sam Ehlinger, and he's played tremendous so far for Texas. He has always been a very consistent quarterback, but this game, he threw 4 interceptions. It was definitely not a good game. I don't know if you watched any of that or what your opinion is on that game.
Yeah, I saw a couple of the highlights. I wasn't necessarily watching it after I saw what TCU was putting it on Texas. I sort of turned off the TV. But one thing that I'm going to say that some people will definitely disagree with me on is I've always felt that Sam Ehlinger was definitely a pretty solid quarterback, but I feel like he's definitely overrated. Texas, it seems like they're always getting the number one athletes and like receivers in any position. So whenever you're working with those types of people, I feel like you being a decent quarterback will blow up.
Mm-hmm.
So he's definitely a solid quarterback, but I don't feel like he's up to the hype that people say that he is.
Yeah, I mean, I know someone who listens to this is not going to agree with me, but I 100% agree with you on that. I mean, Texas always has great athletes. It's just that in a division like the Big 12, the defense in Big 12 is terrible. Offense is pretty good. Of course, you have OU, which we'll talk about here next. But yeah, I mean, Sam Ehlinger, don't get me wrong, really consistent quarterback, solid QB. But I definitely think for what it's worth, he's overrated. I think a lot of people give him the hype of this Heisman winner.
Yeah.
But he's just not. He's not a Tua. He's not a Jalen Hurts, or he's not a Joe Burrow. He's just, an average quarterback in the Big 12. Do I think he has a shot to make the NFL and be either a decent backup quarterback or possibly a low-tier starter? Yeah, I think he has that potential, but we'll just have to see with the rest of the year. And speaking of OU in the Big 12, this was a very, very, very big upset. I was not expecting this. Neither was Austin last episode. Kansas State upsets number 5 Oklahoma 48-41. I was shocked when I saw this. And it wasn't that, and you're probably thinking, okay, Jalen Hurts played a bad game. He went 19 for 26, 395 yards, and a touchdown. He played solid. Of course, still putting up those Heisman numbers, but still didn't come up to what he's supposed to be doing. Or I shouldn't say that. I should say OU didn't come up to what they're supposed to be doing. So I know you said you watched the Texas game. Did you watch at all any of the OU game or any highlights?
I watched a little bit more of the OU game than I did the Texas, and I felt like it's coming down to the lack of readiness going into the game. OU, of course, has the hype of being the number 5th ranked college football team in the nation. But with that being said, whenever they're facing unranked teams, especially teams like Kansas State, I feel like they might not be taking practice as seriously going into it, and then like watching film. I mean, we don't know how much effort they were putting in prior to the game, but what a terrible, terrible upset.
Yeah, it was definitely not good for them. But yeah, we'll just have to see how that plays out because I know that's really, really going to hurt their chances of getting into the college football playoff, especially being a number 5 seed. You are on the I guess you could say the brink of it, of getting into that number 4 seed and making college football playoff. But losing to Kansas State is not going to help your case. And then going on, another big game that came up, number 2 LSU versus number 9 Auburn. That ended 23-20. It was a really, really good game. Of course, Joe Burrow played astonishing, as always he has done this season. No doubt in my mind, I think he is one of the top 3 for the Heisman. But yeah, I mean, every year when LSU and Auburn play, it's going to be a great game.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. LSU did what they needed to do. They got the job done. That was, both teams actually played up to their standard. 23-20, that's a very close game. You can't be really upset about anything if you're an Auburn fan, but it's going to be interesting these next couple of weeks and see how everything plays out.
Yeah. Alrighty, well, it's everyone's favorite time of the podcast, or should I say my guest's favorite time of the podcast, and that's when I ask about some of the predictions this week for college football. We are in week number 10 already. It's surprising that we've already gotten this far in college football. I thought it was still week 9. But yeah, let's get right into it here. Number 14, Michigan at Maryland.
I'd have to go with Michigan on this one. Absolutely.
Absolutely, Michigan?
Yeah.
Oh, let's hope this doesn't come back to bite them. There's always going to be one. I'm just saying. Here's another one that could come back. Virginia Tech at number 16, Notre Dame.
I would have to go with Notre Dame on this one as well. Home field advantage plus them being ranked. Notre Dame has also stepped it up from these past couple of years from their football program. That will also be a very interesting game, though.
All right, next game we got, here's our first ranked matchup. We got number 8, Georgia versus number 6, Florida, and it's going to be at Florida.
So this is where I'm going to go with Georgia. I feel like Georgia's already lost a couple of key games this year, and that's why I think they're ranked where they are. But I feel like this is the game to prove themselves again why they're really a top 5 college football team. So.
All right, next game we got another ranked matchup. Number 15 SMU at number 24 Memphis.
SMU, baby.
You think they're going to keep on the undefeated?
They are, yeah. They're playing outstanding. I actually have a friend that's a outside linebacker.
Oh, that's
for
awesome.
SMU.
Really?
They've just been unbelievable, and it's the discipline's there. It's sort of sketchy because they haven't done this good since the 80s, and that's where the whole scandal with the money came in.
Oh, we all remember that.
But, yeah, they're definitely running football in Texas this year. So.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Another game that is, of course, the second team isn't, of course, and I know I'm saying, of course, a lot in this podcast, but they aren't a ranked opponent. However, they are still a really, really good football program, and that is number 7, Oregon at USC.
Oregon at USC. I will go with USC for this one. A lot of people are probably going to disagree with that one, but I have a lot of faith in USC this year.
So you're calling the upset right now?
Yep.
All righty. Well, there's our upset for this podcast, and then we're going to go back one game because I looked at the rest of them, and I didn't really see anything, but another one that stuck out to me, Ole Miss at number 11 Auburn.
Auburn for sure. They just came off that loss from LSU, but I feel like they played a very, very tight and close game. That'll be a blowout, I feel like. So hopefully I don't jinx that game, but
I hate to say this, but both times that my past 2 guests have said blowout, it turns out they've got upset. But I'm not going to say anything. We'll just have to see how that plays out. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the NFL, the recent trade deadline that just came up. And then, of course, with the start of the NBA season, a lot of things are going right for NBA teams, but also we have some things going wrong for NBA teams. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. The Max Danielsen Show is proud to announce Gage's Granite as an official sponsor for the Saturday podcast. Gage's Granite is a family-run company operating nearby in the Dallas Metroplex. They offer custom granite, travertine, onyx, and marble countertops to homeowners and businesses since 2000. Give them a call today at 972-243-6097 or visit gagesgranite.com or on Facebook and Twitter. You can also stop by the main showroom located at 2427 Glenda Lane in Dallas. Gage's Granite, a proud sponsor of the Max Danielsen Show.
Hey guys, this is Jason with Lacrosse Monkey. Are you looking for a place to shop for your next athletic season? Monkey Sports is here to help. Whether you're looking for baseball, hockey, or lacrosse gear, if you can dream it, we've got it. We provide both the latest and best on the market equipment for your athlete. Stop by and visit us at 105 West Bethany Drive, right off of US 75 in Allen. Monkey Sports, a proud sponsor of the Max Danielsen Show.
And welcome back to episode 7 of the podcast. Unlike the last podcast, I actually know what episode we're on. Last podcast, if you didn't listen, I said it was episode 5 when it was clearly episode 6. Got mixed up there with my host. That was the 5th host, but not episode 5. Anyways, sidetracking from that, let's jump right into professional football with the NFL. So, trade deadline comes up. Not really many big moves. Of course, that most of the big moves were made before the trade deadline, which we talked about on last week's podcast. But more specifically, one of the big moves that came up was Aqib Talib being shipped out to the Dolphins, or what you could call nowhere, basically, where now what they used to say is where careers go to die with the Browns, it's now careers go to die with the Dolphins. Everyone's out of Miami, and now Aqib's having to go into Miami. The one thing, so it makes sense for the Rams to get rid of Aqib, of course, to shed his contract and to get money to re-sign arguably the best cornerback right now, or the best upcoming cornerback in the NFL, which is Jalen Ramsey. But it doesn't make sense why the Dolphins want him, especially the fact that this year they're looking to tank in the NFL. They're looking to or bust, basically. So I got to ask you, what is going through the Dolphins' mind right now? Why do they want Aqib Talib? Because it seems like they're saying, you know what, we do want to tank, but we also don't want to tank.
Yeah, so their problem might be, I actually haven't looked into the roster much, but I'm assuming from this trade that they don't necessarily have like enough leadership in the locker room.
I mean, they don't have anyone.
And
they really don't have anyone.
Yeah, that's true. But
besides Ryan Fitzpatrick, but that's about it.
Oh, not Fitzpatrick.
I mean, that guy's going to bring him out of the tank. He almost did.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a couple games ago, they dropped the ball in the end zone for the 2-point conversion. So, thankfully, the tank is still alive for them. But
I believe the trade that you're mentioning right now, I want to say it was round 5.
Yeah, it was I believe it was around 5. It was either 5 or 6.
Yeah, so I don't agree with it at all. Like what you already said, the Rams, I mean, that's a great deal for them, but the Dolphins, I mean, I just do not know at all why they would think of that.
I mean, it doesn't make sense. The Dolphins are a team that every single year you don't know what their plan is. They come into each year, everyone's like, okay, it makes sense. They got a tank, but then they never do. They always come up and they're like, well, you know, we want a tank and we want to get a good player, but at the same time we want to win games, which of course doesn't equal out. So the next thing that comes up with the Bengals, another team that is playing awful this year, and I'm so glad I traded their running back, Joe Mixon, because he was getting me nothing because their O-line is terrible. But their quarterback, Andy Dalton, was benched for Ryan Finley. And it is it's interesting. Of course, ironically, he's a TCU alumni, and he is an average quarterback probably, I would say, in the NFL, but still a good starter. And I want to ask you, with Andy Dalton now going out of the Bengals lineup, what now should the Bengals do? Because this is like where they just have to agree that, you know what, we need to tank this year. We need someone better. And if so, if they are thinking to tank, have they given up on Andy Dalton?
So I feel like as of right now, Andy Dalton just wasn't the guy, and I feel like he would have to agree with that statement as well. I mean, when your team's not producing overall and you're playing a sport like football, you know, sometimes it can solely be on the quarterback not, you know, producing enough, or like what you said, the O-line. But I feel like there will be a lot of positive interactions between the new starter and Dalton. But I feel like also the era of those quarterbacks, like Dalton and Breeze, or not Breeze, but like Rodgers and stuff, they're sort of on their downfall. So
you're saying Aaron Rodgers is on his downfall?
I feel like it, yes.
Oh, now that's a spicy topic right there. We'll have to see. I mean, definitely, honestly, in my opinion, Rodgers is going to last like Tom Brady, but they're going to need a backup soon.
Yeah.
They tried with, and I hate saying this name, Brett Hundley. Oh, that was a tough season to watch. That was a tough season. And don't get me wrong, Brett Hundley was supposed to be a good quarterback. He came into a terrible situation with the Browns, threw 22 interceptions his first year in the NFL. Came into a Packers team that just was not in pieces last year. And, of course, this year, it was only a matter of time before he got cut. So we'll have to see. I mean, that's definitely a spicy opinion right there about Rodgers. But, I mean, we'll just have to see. But speaking of guys' careers coming to an end, Falcons released their kicker who's been there forever, Matt Bryant. He had a terrible game on Sunday. I want to say he missed like 3 or 4 field goals. He just was not on it. And, of course, just with the Bears last season, getting rid of Cody Parkey, that's the number one job. Being a kicker or a punter, don't get me wrong, is one of the hardest positions in all sports because that is how much your career rides on, 1 or 2 kicks a game. And especially the fact that it could just turn a game just like that. It's a lot of stress. I would say it's like a closer for baseball. A lot of stress, and basically it's your one job. Is just get the job done, get those extra points, or for baseball, is get in, win the game.
Yeah, this year is very interesting when when talking about kickers in general. I feel like a lot of kickers aren't making the points. The give me's that used to be like a no-brainer. Within the 30, I feel like should be an all-day kick.
Unless it's Adam Vinatieri. We know that man does not miss.
But, I don't know. It's just very interesting to see all these guys not succeeding and not being, like a 90 percentile kicker and kicking 90% field goals. But, yeah, I don't know.
So next up, we got a couple other guys that were moved towards the deadline. Cardinals got Kenyon Drake, the running back, ironically, from the Dolphins. It'll be interesting when David Johnson also gets back to see, how they're going to divide up those touches because both running backs still very, very good. Kenyon Drake is nowhere, of course, near David Johnson, but he's not a bad running back. So it'll be interesting how they divide up that. And then the Giants got the crosstown D lineman Leonard Williams from the Jets. He has had a phenomenal year so far on the D-line. So definitely it's going to help the Jets, but then again, the question, why? Why do you go get this guy? Because the Giants are not playing well. They probably won't be a serious opponent for a while, of course, even though they have Daniel Jones, who's an upcoming quarterback. Extremely fun to watch him. Extremely fun to watch Saquon. That guy is just a different animal when he's on the field. He's arguably one of the best running back. You could even make a case for being the best running back, but then again, you have Christian McCaffrey right now, who's putting up MVP numbers. We'll have to see, though, if he does get the MVP. And every single, I'll bring it up again because we talk about this every single week on the podcast, and I have to ask my guests what they think of this. With the NFL being a QB-oriented league, do you think Christian McCaffrey even stands a chance for getting the MVP?
I feel like it definitely does. His quarterback hasn't necessarily performed as well as he has in the past, but he's also a very young running back, and I feel like with all that young talent and him going in there just full speed ahead, he's really proven himself to everybody. And I feel like there's a lot of good things about him as well. If you look into like his personal backgrounds, he stands a lot for like the military and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that's also like very positive.
Yeah, it is. Of course it is. Got to support the troops up or over in the Middle East or wherever they may be, of course. With that, I believe Veterans Day is almost coming up, so salute to the troops. Thank you for your service. And if somehow any of y'all are listening that are either veterans or currently in the military, thank you once again for your service. We really appreciate it here. Other than that, the Jets, besides getting rid of their D linemen, they were way too pricey with some of their other players. Now, Jamal Adams, he wanted to go to the Cowboys, but apparently it came up later that he was actually offended that the Jets went and talked to other teams about him, which makes no sense. But also another player that was up, and I know the Packers were one of the teams, and I know it was also, I believe, the Saints and another team. I can't think of them right now. But they were looking for Robbie Anderson, and both of those guys who they were looking for was way too pricey. The price for Robbie Anderson, don't get me wrong, great wide receiver, but he's not a second-round pick-worthy receiver. He's not like an Amari Cooper that's worth the first. He's not even in – I wouldn't even put Amari Cooper and him in the same sentence. Amari Cooper is one of the best wide receivers. I wouldn't say he's the best wide receiver in the NFL. Definitely one of the best. And, of course, it proves why he was a first-round pick. I don't think Robbie Anderson is worth at the least or at the most, it's going to be a third-round pick.
Yeah.
It realistically, probably fourth, fifth. But for Jamal, it surprised me what the Jets were asking for. I don't know if you read up on what they were asking for. They were asking for 2 first-round picks along with another pick. And Jamal Adams, definitely best safety in the NFL. No questions asked. But for 2 first-round picks, Jerry Jones is not going to take that. 1 first-round pick, yeah, Jerry's going to pull the trigger on that. If he could pull the trigger on that for Amari Cooper, no doubt in my mind he would have done that for Jamal Adams, especially in the fact of the win-now mentality.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like a lot of players, especially in football, are being very, very greedy and getting hurt over a lot of things. There's a lot of people, like AB, who, is very, very dramatic. When you look at the field and the numbers that he puts up, arguably he was one of the best receivers at the time. But then you look into, how much he was wanting and all the controversies with him. It's just, I feel like this is going to sort of make a transition into baseball. But when you have people like Jose Altuve, who was taking pay cuts and wasn't, signing for his max contract for a while, I feel like that's a very good thing to do, because then that allows the team to sign other, either rookies or other talented players and not pay them as much. But overall, your team's going to be getting rings in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. Even so, what you were talking about with contracts, we'll talk about that later when we get into NHL. But one guy, especially you being a Houston fan, this just sucks because I love J.J. Watt. He's a great player, great dude. He does a lot for the community. He is one of the best players in the NFL, no doubt in my mind. But again, he's out for another season with another injury. This time it was a pec tear. I got to ask you, especially being from Houston and the impact that JJ, I know he was humongous with the Hurricane Harvey stuff.
Yes.
He's just an amazing community guy. Overall, a great human being. So I got to ask you, for him going down in Houston, how does A, the Texans respond to that, and B, how does the city of Houston respond to that?
So the city of Houston's definitely going to take that, not lightly. I just actually got an update on my phone a couple of days ago saying that his surgery went well, but of course, like what you already said, he's going to be out for the season. Hopefully he'll still be able to be on the sidelines for all the, for the rest of the season, and be able to just be that positive, motivative guy.
I know, of course, he was there during the World Series right after his surgery.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, that's just the stuff that he does for Houston, how much he loves the city. And especially even, I believe his wife plays for the Houston soccer team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the Houston Dash, yes. That's the professional soccer team in Houston. Mm-hmm. And she's also one of the top players for that team.
Yeah, I heard about that. I've watched a couple of her highlights. She actually is really good, which is not mistaken, of course, whenever they have a kid, because, of course, they just recently got engaged. They're about to get married soon, I believe. Yeah. I mean, that kid's going to be a beast in athletics, no doubt in my mind.
Talking about a small world is actually his fiance, who we're just talking about, that plays for the Houston Dash. She's sisters with an ex-Texan, Brian Cushing's wife. So if they were to get married, Brian Cushing now, I think, is the strength conditioner or coordinator for the Texans. So now there's a lot of athletes that are sort of bonding and tying the knot down together in Houston. So that's really cool and interesting to look at. Man,
what a small world. I mean, we want to talk about, of course, moving on from J.J. Watt, another guy who was big in the community when another hurricane hit just, I want to say it was 2006, with Drew Brees and the city of New Orleans. He had a little bit of an injury that derailed his season, but of course, as we saw last game, just jumped right back on it, extended the Saints winning streak to 6 with the win over the Cardinals by the score of 31-9. He, in that game, he went 34 for 43, 373 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I mean, if you don't think that the Saints are going to be a Super Bowl contender, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. This team, I mean, even with their quarterback struggles, they had Teddy Bridgewater, who stepped in, did a pretty decent job too. Nothing, of course, compared to Drew Brees, but the fact that he could step in and just, I mean, within that time frame that he was injured, just keep the Saints rolling. I don't see it where the Saints aren't one of your picks for a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to agree with that. The Saints, and then, of course, the undefeated Patriots. But one thing that I feel like talking about
Don't forget about the – well, actually, what do you think about the 49ers here?
The 49ers?
What do you think about them? Because I also want to talk about them here in a
They're
second.
also on a hot streak right now. I mean, they're definitely top 5 for me. I feel like they're definitely going to make the playoffs.
Well, no doubt they're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, they got a shot for sure. I mean, everything's in the right line. It's lined up for them, so it's up for grabs.
Some people are going to really hate me about this, okay? Here comes a fiery opinion. Are you ready for this?
Yep.
49ers are overrated. I didn't think that until a couple days ago because I at first was like, yeah, 49ers deserve the number 2 spot, no doubt in my mind. But then I believe it was Thursday morning, I was in debate with many 49ers fans on Instagram talking about how the Patriots still were better than them. And I looked at their schedule, and this is also true with the Patriots, but I'll get into them why the Patriots are a special case in this. The 49ers have not played a contender yet. They have not played a team, I want to say, above third place. Above third place. Their best team, one of them was trying to justify the win versus the Redskins in that really crappy weather, which doesn't make sense, even trying to uphail a win against the Redskins for crying out loud. But also they're like, okay, well, we also defeated Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, but Christian McCaffrey is the only guy that's playing for the Panthers right now.
Yeah.
And then, don't get me wrong, Rams are a great team. They are playing decent, but nothing compared to what they should be playing. So then again, they haven't played anyone. And their best competition, of course, is this upcoming week where they face the Seahawks. And I know in a couple weeks they're going to be facing the Packers, so that'll be interesting to watch. But with the Patriots, same thing. They have one of the easiest schedules, might be the easiest schedule. But let me tell you why that differs from the 49ers. 49ers haven't been good since the 90s. This season just came out of nowhere. Versus where you have the Patriots who have just dominated the NFL through the years. They have proven why. And the funniest part is I said all of this on Instagram, and Pat McAfee said the exact same thing what I said later on. I'm just saying, two great minds think alike right here. I'm not saying, I'm an expert or whatever, but, and by God, I'm nowhere close to, especially with the smartness of Pat McAfee being one of the best kickers. Yes, I have bias towards Pat McAfee. I think he is one of the best punters. You know what? I'm just saying, love Pat McAfee, love J.J. Watt. I have a soft spot in my heart for Pat McAfee because he is great dude, funny dude. Especially if you have not watched his podcast, The Pat McAfee Show, go listen to it. It is hilarious. But over my tangent about Pat McAfee here, going back onto that, so we go on to the Patriots, and their wide receiver, Josh Gordon, last week he was put on IR, and now he was just waived. And this is just not going good for Josh Gordon. Don't get me wrong. Sorry about that. Great wide receiver in the NFL, but number one, just can't get rid of the drugs and injuries. So I want to ask you about that because he was a great wide receiver on the Browns, has proven that he's still a great wide receiver when he played for the Patriots. But now, man, these injuries are just taking a toll on him.
Yeah, they are, and it seems to be like a reoccurring thing with both him and, I don't really want to say it, but JJ as well.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I was actually going to talk about because it sucks.
Yeah.
Because JJ Watt is such a good football player, but then it's kind of like that D Rose where it's just those injuries.
He's definitely never been the same, and the back that was JJ Watt's initial injury. And I didn't think that he was going to be able to come back the same. And he hasn't really. He's definitely still one of the top DNs
for sure. Possibly the best in the NFL.
Yeah, but then with this, now the pec. So it's, I don't know. Injuries are rough. You're playing in a contact sport like football, where it only takes one bad hit or one bad move, and you can be out for the rest that can be a career-ending injury. So
yeah, I mean, and especially when we're talking about D Rose, by the time this podcast goes up on Thursday night a year ago, that was the game where D Rose came in and dropped 50 points.
yeah,
And I remember watching that game, and it was magical just to see the old D Rose back. It was great. He's making a bounce back on his career, just like I like to say Sean Livingston. Both had really, really scary injuries, and of course D Rose has a really scary injury past. But just to see them both prevail is awesome, which is a perfect transition into going into the NBA. And the biggest drama for this week for NBA, there always seems to be some type of drama. I'm just saying. And that is the Karl Anthony Towns and Joel Embiid fight that happened just a couple nights ago. Both players, as of Thursday, were suspended 2 games each. I want to ask you, number one, what you thought about that, because we were talking about yesterday, and that Ben Simmons made Karl Anthony Towns tap out in a headlock.
yeah. So
I'm surprised he didn't get suspended for a couple games.
Yeah, so I was actually at Buffalo Wild Wings whenever I was watching the game. And
I mean, where else is there to watch a basketball game?
Exactly. So, I looked up, and people were telling me that Cat and somebody else got into a fight. But then whenever I looked back, I saw Ben Simmons literally making Cat tap out on the ground like they were in a WWE fight. And then whenever they were walking back, I believe like the parents were starting to get involved.
Yes, that's what I was talking to you about yesterday.
Yeah.
Karl Anthony Towns' parents, when Joel Embiid was walking out, his mother was just berating him. And his dad's just like, just, it's okay, they're fine. But of course, I mean, with any mother, with any great mother, you're going to do that.
Absolutely.
No doubt. So I am all for it for her. Go for it, defend your son. 100% respect that. But again, I'm surprised that Ben Simmons didn't get suspended or even fined for that matter.
Yeah.
I don't think he got anything.
Yeah, I'm surprised too with all the camera angles.
That's exactly. There were so many camera angles, and the camera was right on him on that. Yeah. And I was just like, how do you not do something about that? I mean, then again, just like his mother coming to the aid of his teammate, but no reason he should be in a headlock. No reason he should be given out a headlock. Yeah. But with speaking about a mother here, of course, there were some very tragic and sad news that broke out for the Knicks organization. 2 of their players had some tragedy. The first one, of course, being Dennis Smith Jr., the former Dallas Maverick, probably my favorite player, or one of my favorite players in the NBA. His stepmother passed away. Extremely sad. I know Dennis Smith was extremely heartbroken about that with anyone, of course, but something that was even worse, Reggie Bullock's sister passed away at 22 after being shot. This is 5 years after his other sister was fatally stabbed. I mean, it's such a sad world, man. I mean, I understand, if it's, an accidental car accident, I get that, but the shootings and the stabbings, man, especially for Reggie Bullock, losing his 2 sisters, yeah. That's just hard. I don't even know, because I know Isaiah Thomas a couple years ago lost his sister in a car accident, and he was extremely shooken before that playoff game, and then, of course, he went off that playoff game. But I don't know how, if you're Reggie Bullock, how you keep on going, especially, he had to deal with one of his sisters passing away 5 years ago. Now he's got to deal with the other one.
Yeah. He says to have a lot of faith. I think that's what it comes down to it. And earlier, whenever you asked which player on the Astros didn't, necessarily perform to what they're, supposed to be, I said Alex Bregman. But one thing that I was looking into was, I believe it was Game 7. Actually, his grandfather passed away prior to it. So it was hard for me to say that because, if you look at, the family issues, and I feel like that takes a huge toll on players when you're playing with, somebody that you look up to like as an idol for your whole life. I feel like that could have been one of the reasons why, but
yeah,
it's definitely hard to recover from any losses, and especially if it's something as tragic as the shooting or stabbing and not something accidental.
And especially, I know just a couple weeks ago, I believe Shaq's sister also passed away, if I'm not mistaken, which is, of course, extremely sad as well. But yeah, it's very hard. I know, especially for any player to continue to play through that. I mean, especially going back to that Isaiah Thomas game. I know Brett Favre, we talked about it last week on the podcast, how after his father died, he played one of the best games of his career against the Raiders. But with going on to another topic here, the Golden State Warriors, that franchise is just slowly fading away.
Yeah,
they
what a
are
joke.
currently, as of Wednesday, 1-3 and lost to the Suns. 121-110.
Terrible.
The Suns. Now, if it couldn't get worse for the Warriors, not only they lost KD, Draymond is not playing that well, Klay is out, and now you have Stephen Curry breaking his hand. What is going on with the Warriors? Everyone thought, okay, you know what? They're still at least going to be a top 5 team in the West, no doubt. But then now it is looking really iffy if they even can make the playoffs.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's crazy about sports is they can have an era where, the past 5-10 years they've been arguably the best team in the NBA, and then slowly players start going away, and they still have that same mentality of winning. But with that being said, I mean, breaking that hand is just very unlucky.
And how about this? We're in the middle of talking about Steph Curry. I just get a news announcement from Bleacher Report. Steph out 3+ months. The Warriors star had a surgery today to fix his broken left hand. He's going to be out 3 months. That is, if you look at it now, that's going to be about, February 1st. December. Yeah, February 1st. That is just before the All-Star break with about 2 months left. That is a lot of time that he's going to be out. A lot of games and not much time to come back. It's going to be interesting for them.
Yeah, for sure. In a game like, basketball and baseball, when you play a lot of games, like 1 month doesn't necessarily mean that it's over for you, whereas football, you play once a week, and, one game carries a lot more weight than it does for basketball and baseball. But 3 months is very detrimental.
Especially with an 82-game season. That is, I would want to say maybe 15, 20 games.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fourth of the season right there.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. But especially a guy that we're talking about after with KD leaving to go to the Nets, his teammate Kyrie Irving has been going off so far. Yeah. He has been averaging 35.2, 6.2, and 6. So I got to ask you, is he an early, very, very early MVP candidate for the year?
I mean, numbers don't lie for sure. When you're putting up those stats, that's very insane. Me being, a huge Rockets fan and just Houston sports teams all around, the big question was whether or not Harden and Westbrook were going to be playing well together. And I feel like Westbrook definitely hasn't lived up to the hype either. Harden the other day, he dropped, I believe it was like 59 in the game that they won 159-158 without any overtime, which was crazy. But yeah, Kyrie definitely has MVP numbers as of right now.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, even so, you also have to look at the two people, especially with the Rockets, because you have two guys that are very ball dominant. James Harden's very ball dominant, and then you have Russell Westbrook that's ball dominant. Of course, Russell Westbrook just a couple years ago broke the triple-double record.
Yeah.
And then, James Harden, MVP candidate player who almost hogs the ball the entire game. Yeah. So not only I know they can get along because they've done it before back in OKC, but now especially where they've both broke away for a while, developed into the superstars that they are today, and now having to come back together, it's an iffy situation because don't get me wrong, I do think they are going to figure it out, just like how a Luka and a KP are going to. They have, but especially also those two are very, very young players, and are nowhere yet near the star power of James Harden and Russell Westbrook, respectively. So it'll definitely take some time, I think, to especially reconnect and get back on the same page. But no doubt in my mind, I think they are, A, going to get it down, and B, heck, they could be a top 3 team in the Western Conference.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that you always see about media is like one thing will get blown out of proportion, and that's the only thing that
100%
is publicized. So I
think
Harden
we're talking about the same thing, right?
Yeah, Harden and Westbrook were arguing.
Yes. I was actually about to bring that up.
They're already fighting, but
everyone fights.
Yeah, every single game you're gonna have teammates.
There's gonna be disagreements.
Exactly.
KD and Draymond, of course, they had some beef, but
yeah,
don't get me wrong. when it came down to it, they still got the job done. They figured out how to work with each other. And that was how they created that dynasty. Yeah. So going off of that, we're going to take one more quick commercial break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about a little bit of NHL, just a little bit, because, of course, you can't really go into the full spectrum of the NHL. Of course, I don't have my former co-host back with Jam Sports for any of my Bishop Lynch viewers. For Jackson over here who doesn't know, back in high school I ran a sports talk show, and my co-host lived, ate, slept, and dreamed hockey. This dude just knew hockey inside out. So that was my hockey source who I knew, I could talk about hockey and he would fill in, the in-betweens and the blank spaces that I have. So it's nothing going to be like that. By the way, he's going to be on the podcast, so stay tuned for that, my viewers. But yeah, so when we get back, we're going to talk about just a little bit about that. But without further ado, of course, don't get anywhere. We will be right back. The Max Danielsen Show is proud to announce Gage's Granite as an official sponsor for the Saturday podcast. Gage's Granite is a family-run company operating nearby in the Dallas Metroplex. They offer custom granite, travertine, onyx, and marble countertops to homeowners and businesses since 2000. Give them a call today at 972-243-6097 or visit gagesgranite.com or on Facebook and Twitter. You can also stop by the main showroom located at 2427 Glenda Lane in Dallas. Gage's Granite, a proud sponsor of the Max Danielsen Show.
Hey guys, this is Jason with Lacrosse Monkey. Are you looking for a place to shop for your next athletic season? Monkey Sports is here to help. Whether you're looking for baseball, hockey, or lacrosse gear, if you can dream it, we've got it. We provide both the latest and best on the market equipment for your athlete. Stop by and visit us at 105 West Bethany Drive, right off of US 75 in Allen. Monkey Sports, a proud sponsor of the Max Danielsen Show.
And welcome back to the podcast. Of course, want to give a special shout out to our sponsors, Monkey Sports and Gage's Granite. They're awesome people. Go give them a visit and check them out. Without further ado, Jackson, let's jump right into the NHL. The Stars have, thankfully, been on the rise. They are now 5-8-1. They have came back this season, and one of their most recent games, they were down 3-0 to the Minnesota Wild and came back with 6 unanswered goals to win the game. So far for the Stars, Tyler Seguin leads with 9 points. Roop Hintz, Miro Heiskanen, and Alexander Radulov have 8 points as well. And Roop Hintz also leads in goals with 7. So I don't know if you've watched any of the Stars season, and if you do, and if you have not, just no bias or anything, not a big deal. But I just want to ask you what you think they've done so far and, how they can continue to rise, I guess we could say.
Yeah, making that comeback not only in that game, but as a season, I think what were you saying that their record was?
Their record just a couple weeks ago was like 1-8. I think they're on a 4 or 3 game winning streak right now.
Yeah, so that's very impressive. Even if you don't know anything about hockey, winning, 4 straight games is very hard to do, especially the last one being, down 3-0. But I don't really watch much of hockey because whenever we had the Houston Aeros, that's whenever I always have like my birthday parties there and stuff like that. I'll just love seeing guys throw down the gloves and just go at it. But
that's one of the best things about hockey.
Yeah, absolutely. But I am glad that even though being from Houston, that the Dallas's professional hockey team is doing very, very well.
I mean, one thing that really surprised me about Houston, especially I know I was talking to, I believe it was the athletic director of St. Thomas this past Sunday, and he was talking about how there was a game a long time ago in 1991 back in Houston, and it really surprised me because the more I thought about it, I was like, how does Houston not have a franchise team yet? I know Seattle just got one, so I mean it'll be a matter of time till I think there are definitely more cities that are going to be getting a team beforehand, but I feel like Houston eventually is going to get one. And especially with being one of the biggest cities in America, no doubt in my mind they're going to get one. Yeah, at least sometime soon.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your statement there. I think the main reason why actually the Houston Aeros left Houston was because they were paying rent to the Rockets owner at the time, and the Rockets owner was trying to charge them rent as if they were an NHL team. So although there was a lot of support with the fans in Houston, there wasn't sellouts, and also you couldn't charge NHL prices. So I think Tillman Fertitta, who's now the owner of the Rockets and owns multiple other things, and just completely renovated the U of H Cougars men's basketball court. I feel like he already has said in interviews saying that I really want an NHL team back in the city alone, because not only does it make him money, but also makes the fans and just the sport as itself grow.
Yeah. I forgot the Houston Aeros. Now they are the They are the Iowa Wild. They are the Minnesota Wild's. I want to say it's the AHL affiliate. So, yeah, I totally forgot about that whole thing. Another guy that was big in the NHL this week is Roman Josi being extended for 8 years, $72 million. So far this season, he has had 5 goals, 8 assists. He is 7 on the the plus-minus chart, and is also 2 goals shy from 100 career goals. We talked about it earlier with contracts, especially in the NBA. You see these guys getting big contracts, like a Kyrie Irving or D'Angelo Russell. Yeah. But then in hockey, a $9 million contract is very, very expensive for a player. Just in regard, I believe right now the highest contract is somewhere around $11 to $12 million. So that's just to give you kind of like an estimate of what the NHL is working with, what the players are working with, and even so, the complete, I would say, different worlds of the NBA, NFL versus the NHL, and even, heck, the MLB along with the NBA and NFL.
Yeah, you see J.J. Watt signing like an over $100 million contract, and then Jose Altuve with the same. I think it was actually 200 for Jose, something insane, like $30 million a year. But yeah, if you put into perspective the other contracts that like the best of the best are making in NHL, and then you see this $9 million extension, that's very, very impressive.
Yeah. All right, next guy that we got here is Vladimir Tarasenko of the St. Louis Blues, of course, the defending Stanley Cup champions. The Blues had a terrific season last year. It was one of the most remarkable. At one point, they were down. I want to say they were the worst team in the NHL at one point, and then came all the way back. I know it was tough to watch the Dallas Stars lose to the Blues, especially with Ben Bishop. I want to say he recorded 50 saves one game and just could not get it done. The offense couldn't get it done. But Tarasenko is out for 5 months due to a shoulder injury, and so far in 2019, he has scored 3 goals, 7 assists, and is -2 in the plus-minus category. And over his career, he has both 214 goals and 214 assists, and is 75 in the plus-minus category. Now we go on to the entire NHL. The right now leading division leaders are the Colorado Avalanche, the Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins, and the Edmonton Oilers. So I want to ask you, Jackson, before we end off this podcast, who do you think is going to have a shot at the Stanley Cup? And I know it's extremely, extremely early to even think about that, but, who do you think is going to do it?
I feel like the Capitals will definitely pull it off. This is going to be a funny reason why, but ever since the Nationals, took it home from the MLB team that had the best record in baseball, the Houston Astros, I feel like now that city's just completely on fire and is just roaring right now with nothing but a bunch of positive interactions with, both the fans and the players that, they're very supportive of each other. So I feel like the Capitals will pull it off.
Do you have anything for Western Conference, or are you just saying champion?
I feel like they'll win it all, but for the Western, I'll go with the Bruins.
That's Eastern Conference.
Oh, okay.
It's your Western Conference teams are the Colorado Avalanche and the Edmonton Oilers. I'll put it this way: Edmonton has arguably one of the best players in hockey with Connor McDavid, but then again, you also have the Avalanche, who are an extremely young team and are just an up and coming team.
I'll go with Avalanche.
Avalanche.
I don't know much about the teams, but
you said you're not. I respect it. Still giving a prediction. My prediction, I'm going to say, is going to be I'm going to say the Edmonton Oilers and then the Buffalo Sabres will be facing off in the NHL Stanley Cup. Who's going to win that? I don't know. I don't know, because you have Jack Eichel and Connor McDavid, who are both the top picks in that year's draft. Both are extremely, extremely good players, faces of the NHL in the future. But we'll just have to see. My prediction, honestly, this is going to be a very far-fetched statement, but I think if the Sabres play well, like they've had before, I think the Sabres can win the NHL Stanley Cup. And I know that seems very far-fetched, especially coming into the fact that we are just a few weeks, and I believe maybe a month into the NHL season. But, of course, we will just have to see how that plays out. And that is going to conclude another edition of the Max Danielsen Show. This is actually the longest we've had so far. Actually, just right now, hitting the hour mark, which is insane, just to say the least. But, of course, there's one thing I just asked my guests at the very end, if you have any final remarks.
No, not really. I just hope that, our team, the Austin College Roos for baseball, it's going to be very interesting. We lost some key players last year, our 4 and our 1-hole hitter. Also the shortstop and center fielder, but I feel like the freshmen have some talent, so it'll be very interesting to watch.
We'll just have to see. And once again, thank you, Jackson, for coming on the show. You've been an awesome guest. And with that, this is going to once again end our 7th episode of the podcast, as we thank you for watching from myself, Max Danielsen. And as always, have a pleasant good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, wherever or whenever you may be watching. Thank you.